Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Lorgar's discovery, Lorgar's Betrayal in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Index ***, Iron Warriors. Origins. It is not known, and was not even to the fourth Primarch himself, how Perturabo came to land on the rugged and mountainous planet of Olympia. His earliest memory, he claimed while alive, was climbing one of the world's pinnacles. He clambered on, up cliffs where a drop meant death, until the infant reached the town on top of the mountain, the city-state known as Lakos. There, the tyrant of Lakos himself, a man named Damikos, took the child in. Perturabo knew his name as early as he gained awareness, and learned exceedingly quickly, both from his tutors and from the genetic knowledge implanted by the emperor. He fulfilled every hope that Damikos could have had of him. Every hope, that is, except one: he never truly loved the tyrant. Damikos's attempts to treat Perturabo as a son failed. Perturabo would spend his days thinking, designing wondrous structures never to be built and impressive experiments never to be conducted. And his every hour outside was also affected by his ability to see, in the interstellar distance, every warp storm in the galaxy, above all the titanic mass of the Eye of Terror. But before Damikos could come up with an alternative goal, Lakos was attacked by a league of neighboring city-states. It was a well-executed play. The outer defenses of Lakos were rammed through, Damikos' firstborn son Heracon grievously wounded, and battle raged in the city streets, while Damikos hid in the fortified palace with his remaining family. It seemed Lakos was doomed, until Perturabo came out of the palace and rallied the citizens. His presence was potent enough in itself, and that alone returned hope to the city's people, but his physical might, and the massive flail he wielded, were the final deciding factor. Perturabo killed people by the dozen, and the streets of Lakos, for a brief while before the retreat was called, ran red with the invaders' blood. The first taste of battle for the Iron Warriors Primarch was exhilarating, but his rational side also felt, all too well, the human cost of the day. Many of the enemy soldiers had not themselves wanted to attack Lakos, but had died nevertheless. Such was the beginning of Perturabo's lifelong dance with the problem of war, the epitome of everything he loved and hated. Damikos, realizing Perturabo's power as not only an engineer, but a warrior, outlined plans to conquer all of Olympia. And Perturabo, having given his iron word to be Damikos' son, had no choice but to obey. He led the armies of Lakos as a general, demolishing enemies throughout Olympia despite being grievously outnumbered. Within a few years, Damikos ruled the world, as none had been able to do for millennia. Perturabo offered mercy to vanquished civilians, but nothing of the sort was given to enemy warriors, who were trying to protect their home, and Lakos' soldiers, too, suffered great losses, for the scope of Damikos' ambition vastly outstripped what could be achieved by any but a Primarch. It is said that, when he defeated the last of his foes, Perturabo looked around the battlefield, littered with both sides dead, which vastly outnumbered the living, and then, without a word, he clipped his flail to his back and took the first step in his walk back to Lakos. Damikos' megalomania had brought ruin to a planet, and Perturabo's power had been enough to aid in that, but Perturabo had promised to be a son to him. Only Damikos' wars of conquest had seen the death of all three of his biological children, Heracon in battle, the younger son Andos during a peace negotiation, and his only daughter Calliope by assassination, and vengeance for their 3 lives, Perturabo decided, was the first thing those familial bonds demanded of him. After Perturabo killed Damikos, he began his sole reign over Olympia, and by all accounts he was a perfect ruler. He ruled Olympia like a machine, but it was a machine where every tiny cog was not only desirable to maintain, but necessary. To that end, he promised no more war. Battle had brought him great joy, but it had brought torment to everyone. Olympia prospered, as did its surrounding worlds, and then the Emperor of Mankind heard of this, and Perturabo's false paradise came crashing down. The Great Crusade. The Emperor of Mankind came down to Olympia, and Perturabo accepted him as his true father, instantly recognizing his parentage. Olympia was sworn to the Imperium of Man, and Perturabo met his fate. For, it turned out, he had all along been designed as above all a general for the Emperor's armies, fated to lead his gene sons, the Iron Warriors, into battle. At first Perturabo was highly unimpressed with his legion, but after a discussion with young warsmith Barabbas d'Antioch, he accepted them as his unit without comment. That, however, left the still significant problem of Perturabo's martial fate. He would have decimated us, you know. Killed every 10th, by chance. And you would likely have died even if the lottery did not choose you, because it would be your fault. You are not Legion Master, not anymore. And Perturabo is a Primarch. He will make this Legion what it has to be. And unlike you, he won't complain about it. Barabbas d'Antioch. Rationally, there was nothing Perturabo despised more, emotionally, there was nothing he needed more. Understanding why did little to help. He accepted the Emperor's great crusade as righteous, though, and took up command, as he was fated to. Upon doing so, he pledged to war ruthlessly, and leave compassion and awe behind. If he had always been a general, then he had no need for regret or guilt. Perturabo met his brothers soon after. Some, he rapidly built a rapport with, for instance, Fulgrim of the Emperor's children, especially in the early crusade, inspired Perturabo by combining a devotion to perfection with the achievement, in small slivers, of that perfection. Fulgrim's close friend Robert Guilliman, however, was rather more accusatory towards Perturabo, for his ruthlessness and a lack of attention to peaceful pursuits. Eventually Guilliman drove Perturabo away, to some extent, from Fulgrim. There were others. Leman Russ of the Space Wolves understood the Primarch's savage nature. And Rogaldorn of the Imperial Fists seemed to be the only Primarch that actually understood Perturabo's dilemma. Of them all, Rogaldorn alone saw the basic futility of the Primarch's lives. Other relations were less friendly. Fukin disliked Perturabo's destructiveness, and Angren much else about him. Perturabo, for his part, saw Angren as too distant from the crusade and too gentle with Xeno species. Fukin was another matter. Perturabo was envious of him, in many ways, for retaining some of his humanity in the furnace of the crusade. That, however, also did not lead to good relations. As for Ferrus Manus, he seemed to use war as a means to gain power. More than any other Primarch, he utilized the Great Crusade only as a means to, it occasionally seemed, ultimately launch some sort of coup and become Emperor of the Galaxy himself. At the least, he was ruthless, but in a way unlike Perturabo, and dishonorable in ways Perturabo was not. Perturabo's Iron Warriors were larger than most legions, numbering perhaps 170,000. But there was a reason this was necessary. The Iron Warriors earned renown for bloody attacks and painful victories, in large part because Perturabo saw those were necessary and was willing to sacrifice anything if it was required. Perturabo fought offensive sieges, frequently involving frontal assaults. And Perturabo enjoyed those victories, despite their destructive nature. Meditation on such things led him to write the Book of Perturabo, a discussion of the philosophy of war. It has been noted that, after writing the Book of Perturabo, the Lord of Iron, as he was occasionally called, became significantly more comfortable in his role, though never entirely so. Perturabo's home world of Olympia continued to thrive. It was a center of commerce, technology, and nearly everything other than warfare. The Lord of Iron preferred it that way, but it did create an uncomfortable situation in terms of legion recruitment. Families on Olympia were highly reluctant to send their children into the meat grinder that was the 4th Legion's method of war. Perturabo's solution was simply to recruit from other planets as well. This kept up legion numbers, but led to an increasing distance of the Iron Warriors from their Primarch's home world. Worlds conquered by the 4th Legion were brought into compliance by any means necessary, often with significant losses among the defenders. Perturabo always gave his enemies a chance to surrender. They often did, allowing for a high total of conquered worlds. The Legion often fought alongside other Asteroutes, who tended to get more glory for the victory, but Perturabo cared little for glory. Glory was not the point of the Great Crusade. In the Rayquazarin cluster, for instance, Perturabo faced a strange, burrowing Xeno species that was allied with the local Eldar. The Iron Warriors, without hesitation, marched into their caverns to burn them out. The Xenos had set many traps, most of which the Iron Warriors noticed and avoided, but charging the fortifications still cost many Astarte lives. Ultimately, Perturabo killed, simultaneously, both the Xeno leader and the Eldar prince assisting him, as a trophy, he reforged their war gear into a decoration on his armor, the crown unforgiving. After the cluster was taken, and every alien exterminated, but before the area began to be resettled by human colonists, Perturabo erected an obelisk on the central plateau, containing the names of every Iron Warrior that fell in the campaign. This began a tradition. Perturabo's obelisks were destroyed by the Imperium after the discovery, but those that survive still hold great power. In the Perenisic system, meanwhile, Perturabo met 20 separate human nations. The first of them did not accept his order of surrender, and the Iron Warriors killed every soldier in their army, and also destroyed all military infrastructure. Then, to make an example, Perturabo also took away all technology that had been designed for military purposes, ultimately leading to the region's technology collapsing all the way down to bronze working levels. The other 19 nations were asked for their surrender the day after the victory, all 19 accepted. Not long after, Perturabo received word from Terra that Olympia no longer wished to be known as the home world of the 4th Legion, Malcador proposing to take it out of the Legion's administration and to grant them a new fief, perhaps an entire cluster of worlds, to recruit from at a sufficient rate to replace their losses. Perturabo accepted the news relatively calmly, and refused the offer of recompense, declaring that the 4th would from this point forth be fleet-based, but inside, he raged endlessly at his father for taking his only peaceful accomplishment from him. And then, news from Rogaldorn. The Great Betrayal. Rogaldorn, Perturabo's closest brother, sent word to the Lord of Iron. It invited him to do the unthinkable, participate in a rebellion against the Emperor of Mankind. To do this would require breaking Perturabo's word, would doom him to being incapable of trusting himself. But the Emperor had broken Perturabo. And his Iron Warriors, his sons, were increasingly frustrated with the Great Crusade, and not due to Perturabo's direction. And Perturabo knew he enjoyed killing, enjoyed it more than he had any right to, and raged at himself and the world plenty due to this contradiction. So he chose to reject his birthright no more. From this day forth, Perturabo and the Iron Warriors would embrace death. From this day forth, they would be more than soldiers. They would be gods of war, at times magnificent, always terrible. Perturabo lay down the flails that had been his signature weapon since Lacos, and sent them into a nearby star. To replace them, he forged himself a pure black spear. Peace is a wondrous thing. But there is no peace among the stars, and there will never be. My father did not break his oaths, Rogal. We are the ones doing so, and I, for one, will never forgive myself for it. But the taste of blood corrupts, one asks for more, and I will have more. No matter what the price is. But I will pay that price, too. That is my way. Perturabo. Perturabo had been friends with Leman Russ of the Space Wolves during the Great Crusade. During that time, he had wondered how Russ would fare against Magnus the Red, whom Russ had always had a major rivalry with. Now, the Lord of Iron had a chance to find out, forging an order from the Emperor, for Perturabo was always far more capable with the mechanical than others gave him credit for Magnus' destruction and sending it to Russ. Then, he hurried to the Istvan system. Perturabo sent those elements of his legion he believed would not support him down to Istvan's surface. But he had not predicted the betrayal that resulted, though he would later say that he should have expected it, in a time of shattering such as they were experiencing. Perturabo's three most trusted wars myths, at this point Phorix of the 1st, Barabbas d'Antioch of the 5th, and Harkur of the 23rd, formed a council known as the Trident. But while the Trident remained loyal to Perturabo, the same was not true of the highest-ranked Iron Warrior outside it. Barosuz and the Second Grand Company, with many others, defected from his side and joined Alexis Pollix's rebellion. Meanwhile, Ferrus Manus hurled an increasing number of snide insults at Perturabo. The Lord of Iron ignored them at first, but he had sworn to contain his rage no more, and so the 4th Primarch made a final oath to Kern, and screamed back at Ferrus, at first with words and then, when Ferrus showed no intent of stopping, with live ammunition. Dorn attempted to negotiate a ceasefire, but Ferrus refused those suggestions, insisting that only Lorgar, the agreed-on leader of the revolt, could do so. The first stage of the war went decisively in the Gorgon's favor, concluding in his trapping Perturabo on the strike cruiser Veritas Ferrum. There, Ferrus almost killed the Lord of Iron, but ultimately chose not to. perhaps because he knew that doing so would have destroyed any chance the rebellion had, but more likely because of the incoming Iron Warrior reinforcements. This began the Iron War's second stage, and that was a stage marked by Iron Warrior victories. Perturabo skillfully used the ships of Pollux and his allies to interfere with Ferris's attacks. But Ferris, knowing the fragility of the situation, used Corphaeron rather than Lorgar and negotiated a neutral ceasefire at last. In theory, Perturabo was also meant to apologize shortly before the fleet's departure, but no one actually expected him to. The Lord of Iron's fury towards his brother endured, but it had been tempered with a fury towards himself. The Istvan War was the bloodiest of the Fourth Legion's many bloody engagements to that point. Perhaps 125,000 of the Iron Warriors were alive to make planetfall on Terra, and of those only 115,000 actually did, the rest being engaged in battles across the galaxy. The First Fleet sped towards Terra, and Perturabo, like Dorn, refused to stop and wait for the second. On the final approach, Perturabo uncovered a Night Lord spy. Interrogation showed that the Night Lords and their Alpha Legion allies had sabotaged the First Fleet in a number of ways. What was worse, it became evident that the Second Fleet had been even worse affected, slowed down to the point of losing contact with the First Fleet by a combination of spies, sorcery, and skirmishes. The Loyalists had successfully split the rebellion's forces, leaving the First Fleet no choice but to strike at Sol alone. Perturabo was sick at the revelation, and he decided to atone for it by being the first to breach the Imperial Palace, by any means necessary. But Dorn did not seem to agree, preferring a cautious approach. Therefore, the Lord of Iron increasingly acted alone, sacrificing as many of his forces as necessary to gain victory. Besides, he had been informed by Kern's daemons that his god cared not from where the blood flowed. Dorn was furious at the disobedience, but Perturabo actually achieved his goal, in a sense. A massive force under Warsmith Crondall managed to break through into the Imperial Palace, assisted in doing so by Triarch Harker sacrificing his own life and his grand company. The new 23rd Warsmith would be the lone survivor, one Kroger. But Crondall's force was immediately met by the Imperial War Master Guilliman himself, before the breach could be secured. Against such power, Crondall could only die, though he severely wounded Guilliman with massed fire in the process. But then the Death Guard arrived, and the battle, already tilted in the Imperium's favor as the Iron Warriors' forces slowly ran out, was lost entirely. The Iron Warriors' remnants retreated to impromptu fortresses, which they defended relatively successfully. It was well known that Perturabo would be a prime target of the Loyalists, and so his own fort was well hidden, but when Leman Russ and the Space Wolves arrived, the Wolf King sniffed Perturabo out, and Ferris Manus refused to save him. The Space Wolves, angry at the slight to their honor, immediately attacked. Foryx looked at his Primarch, hope in his eyes. He saw Perturabo was tired, furious at Ferris Manus, and all that, but the Stormbird was ready, and they would have a chance at survival. Somehow, they could yet both survive this day, assuming of course that the wolves didn't bring the gunship down. "Let's go, my lord," he said. Barabbas was right, any fortress will eventually fall. But we can leave this one before it does. Perturabo stood unmoving. "Let's go," Foryx said. "Russ is stronger than you, right now. He will kill you." And then Perturabo turned, with a sadness in his eyes that Foryx assumed he would never recover from. Until Kyrnitic, he would be correct. "I know," Perturabo said. "If I go with you, I might survive. Become a Daemon Prince of War. But that changes you, in the end, just as war does in general. You do not lose all of yourself, but you lose all the peaceful parts. And those are the parts I treasure most. Honor and resolve can remain, treasure them always, Foryx. But I would rather die in war than live forever in it. This is my price. Now go. Go." And, as Bjorn of the Wolf Guard battered down the door and Foryx's Stormbird lifted off, he saw the Primarch smile, for the only time since he had known his second father. It was not a smile of triumph, nor joy. It was a smile of someone who understood. Understood a secret that no one else seemed to. In that instant, Foryx understood it too, but he would never remember it afterwards. 1,000 wolves died before Leman Russ finally reached the minefield's center. There, the Primarches dueled. Perturabo was strengthened by the blessings of Kern, but weakened by his own doubt. In the end, perhaps he threw that off, but it was too late. Rus broke the Lord of Iron's black spear and killed Perturabo. The death, brought on by a brother's betrayal, reverberated in the warp. From the point 8 days after Perturabo's death, no daemon sworn to Kern would be summoned on Terra for the remainder of the war, and those who attempted such rituals would die painfully, for the blood god had rescinded his blessing from the rebellion. The few, less than 40,000, surviving Iron Warriors on Terra, too, were incensed, retreating to the ships which were once more open to them, not attacking the Iron Hands and Massey only. That would be suicide. They were a legion broken and disorganized, a legion whose primarch was dead without a clear successor. And when Lorgar fell and the Discoverers retreated, the Iron Warriors did so too. But Foryx, though consumed by apathy, made a final vow as he left Terra behind. One way or another, the Iron Warriors would yet see the galaxy burn. The escape. In the wake of the defeat on Terra, Foryx, exhausted, convened the remnants of the Legion's leadership. They were a sorry sight, and none more so than Foryx himself. The ruination on Terra had crushed the Iron Warriors' spirit as well as their numbers. Foryx led the Legion to the only safe place for them, the Eye of Terror, but seemed reluctant to do any more. It was there then Warsmith Barbenfok made a speech to the assembled Warsmiths. He rededicated the Legion to Kern, and swore to make the Imperium pay for what it had done to their primarch. The Iron Warriors, he said, would not transform into a bunch of uncontrollable berserkers. Neither would they become decadent, like the Loyalist Legions or the White Scars. They would continue as they had always been, following the memory of their primarch. Strength, honor, and willpower would guide the Legion down their new path. A council of Warsmiths was proposed, and formed, led by Foryx, Dantioch, and Fok himself. Two extreme factions of the Legion were led by Toramino, the master of the Legion's siege engines, who refused to commit to Kern, and Kroger, who led the Legion's blood cults. The Legion was reforged on the daemon world of Midrengard, and from there the Council of Warsmiths agreed to try and renew relations with Rogaldorn's Doomfists. Thus, they began the Iron Cage campaign, an attempt to conquer Segmentum Obscurus for the Chaos Gods, and especially Kern. Kroger's barbaric, but not out of control, warriors formed the front of the attack. Unfortunately, the Imperial armies and populace were far more successful in defense than had been expected. The campaign stalled, and as the Blood God lost interest, turned around. Kroger returned to the Eye of Terror, where he killed Toramino, who he saw as an insult to Kern, and took over Midrengard, shifting his focus to fighting the other Chaos Legions, especially the Iron Hands. The siege lines drawn by the Doomfists and the Iron Warriors stopped the human attacks for a time. Foryx led the armies of Chaos in triumph one last time on the world of Kyrnitic, where his abundant sacrifices to Kern led him to ascend to the rank of Daemon Prince. Having thus succeeded, the first Iron Warrior to do so, Foryx left his position in the council to a young Iron Warrior, with experimental gene seed, named Hansu. Hansu proved a talented commander, but the arrival of the Death Guard cancelled out any effect from the breakthrough on Kyrnitic. Trenches collapsed, and Dantioch, Fok, and Hansu together ordered the Iron Warriors' first ever fighting retreat. Dorn joined them, but Overkadiah slowed down enough to meet Mort Arian in battle. That, too, was only a Pyrrhic victory. Mort Arian died, body, mind, and soul, Dorn did not. But the Loyalist Primarch's soul burned brightly enough to burn the demonic from the area of space, creating the Mort Ariel worlds and pushing the Iron Warriors even further into the Eye of Terror. Upon this final defeat, Fok reconvened the Council of Warsmiths, Dantioch, and Hansu at his side. There, he declared that though the Iron Cage campaign had failed, it had also vindicated the Legion's continued principles. Besides which, Dorn's sons were, once more, relative allies. The Iron Warriors had not been obliterated, despite the defeat. Times had changed. But iron was eternal. The Long War. Fighting in the name of iron, then, the Iron Warriors have continued to spill blood across the stars in their god's name. After Fok's ascension to daemonhood in M33, and the death of his successor Andraz in a massive orc invasion of the fortress world of Castellax, the current trident that leads the Council of Warsmiths contains the ancient Dantioch, who firmly believes in the value of defensive warfare, Hansu, a generalist who has risen above relatively humble origins to become a mastermind and master warrior in offensive operations, and Caucator, a warsmith who has fought since the Great Crusade but is new to the Trident, notable for his swordsmanship as well as a knack for diplomacy even with dubious allies. Each of the three has proven their worth in countless campaigns. In the name of the Blood God, the Iron Warriors have, of course, achieved many triumphs. In early M32, the Curses of Alganar, a Slaaneshi daemon summoning relic, activated on the imperial world of Talern. The Eldar of Craft world Bealtan, the local human armies, and the Iron Warriors all descended on the planet, leading to a four-way war. Warsmith Koros ended up victorious, retrieving the Cursus and rededicating it to his own patron. The defenders of Talern, though, could claim their own share of victory, as they did successfully defend their planet, which remains a productive imperial world. In late M33, Barban Falk led the operation that would raise him to the status of Daemon Prince. Olympia, the Iron Warriors' old home world, had been judged worthy of reintegration into the Imperium, as opposed to being destroyed like the other traitor home worlds. Falk decided to end that absurdity. The Raven Guard defending the planet were killed to a man, and the world's entire population and infrastructure was sacrificed to Kern. Kroger, Falk's right hand in this campaign, paid the iron price for the victory. The Raven Guard caught up to him and disintegrated him, 200 years later, in a massive war on the weapons-testing world of Vianid. The engagement was devastating to the Blood Cults, which collapsed after the defeat. Kroger charged against the Raven Guard, his Blood Cult following him, screaming oaths to Kern. They had lost all sense of strategy, he realized with disgust, all sense of control. They were no better than the humans that became mere vessels for the power of the Blood God. And it was his fault. Well, so be it. The Raven Guard had fought well, and they would fight well here, and most likely end the Blood Cults forever. And if he somehow won, then he would need to give himself up to the deepest rage in the warp, surrendering himself to the Blood God and becoming like them. Either way, he would die here. But, Kroger knew full well, which caused him much happiness, he would not die alone. In late M41, the Maladrax Wars renewed the Iron Warriors' fraternal bonds with the Doomfists. Maladrax was a world on the fringes of the Eye of Terror, under constant imperial pressure, led by warsmith Shantu. In the First Maladrax War, it was assaulted by Wa'ak Biglug, which had already killed Andraz of the Trident in its advance, leaving his forces remnants under the speedy warsmith Rodon to join up with Shantu as they rebuilt. In addition to Rodon's forces, however, Shantu had the help of Doomfists under Captain Vornhagen, and Shantu and Hagen replied by personally leading a counter-attack into the Orc forces, crushing the invasion while miraculously receiving only one mild wound each, in the same part of their left arms. Much Orc blood was spilled that day, but the Second Maladrax War, a massive attack of the Qorl Xenos, spurred on by the Luna Wolves invading their empire, was another matter entirely. The assault led to desperate fighting and the destruction of Maladrax, but it was also a victory, for many of the Qorl were turned to Kern and Chaos, and fight alongside Shantu and Hagen to this day. Also in late M41, Hansu led a titanic attack against one of the Imperium's spare gene seed stocks on Hydra Caudatus. The result was a lengthy siege that ended in the Mechanicum defenders setting up a self-destruct. In truth, however, that was precisely what Hansu had wanted. Hydra Caudatus had been valuable not for its gene seed, but rather for a strategic position in a new master plan for a Black Crusade against the Imperium. Organization. Before the discovery and the war associated with it, the Iron Warriors, under their Primarch Perturabo, were divided into grand companies, sometimes known as grand battalions, each of which was led by a warsmith, with several captains under them. The Legio has maintained a similar structure since that time. Today, the Legion has rebuilt its strength to approximately 210,000 Marines at any given point, though its turnover rate remains high compared to other Chaos Legions. These are led by the Council of Warsmiths, which contains every warsmith in the Legion that has not turned from it. Altogether, about 10,000 Iron Warriors do not follow the Council at all, in various chaotic organization patterns. The Council meets rarely, and though it is nominally led by a trident of particularly accomplished Iron Warriors, in reality it often devolves into infighting. The council contains about 70 warsmiths, each commanding a grand company of up to 8,000 asteroutes, nominally, 8,192. Each grand company is itself divided into iron rings under captains, with nominal size 256 iron warriors, which are divided into squads of 8 warriors. In truth, most grand companies are less than half strength. Additionally, the Iron Warriors maintain a set of orders that transcend Grand Company and Squad allegiance. The main two such orders have been preserved since the time of the Great Crusade. The Dodecatheon is a secret organization devoted to the general advancement of the Iron Warriors Legion and the preservation of its traditions, generally consisting of captains and warsmiths, led by the Trident themselves. Any time when the 4th Legion acts as one, it is probably less due to the Council of Warsmiths and more due to the Dodecatheon's influence. The Storbezishk, meanwhile, are the Iron Warriors' answer to the Tech Marines of other legions. They are led by the dreadnought Captain Chingril, and focus on the upkeep of weaponry and, particularly, vehicles and battle engines, including the Trident-class Titans that outgun any Titans produced by the Imperium, at least while within the warp-saturated bounds of the eye, standing hundreds of meters tall. There are rumors that some among the Storbezishk do not exclusively worship Kern, instead following the path of chaos undivided, but this is certainly not the case with Chingril himself, who is by some, including his rival within the Storbezishk warsmith Jerish, considered to be treading too close to the Berserker's path. The Storbezishk do not, however, have sole jurisdiction over Legion infrastructure. Any warsmith or captain with a fortress and the industry to support said fortress will say their part in their layout and engineering. Perhaps 7% of the Legion is in the Storbezishk, far fewer are members of the Dodecatheon, maybe 0.5%, though all such statistics are complicated by the Order's partial, and the Dodecatheon's total, secrecy. Another 4 to 5% of the Legion are members one of the other orders. These fulfill the place of most specialists, the largest being the Amazason, which fulfills most apothecary functions and is also noted as the closest successor to the ancient blood cults, and the Sineshith, responsible for gene seed retrieval, storage, modification, mutation, and implantation. One such order, it is rumored, houses the remnants of the Iron Warriors Librarium, which trains psychers in those few disciplines Kern does not despise. Combat Doctrine. The Iron Warriors are followers of the blood god, Kern, but are far from the mindless berserkers that many of his mortal warriors become. They maintain their ancient principles of honor and logic, but also accept that they are soldiers, to the exclusion of all else. That does not exclude, for instance, planning factories to build tools for factories for war engines, but no Iron Warrior could have the authority to control such factories without being an exceptional military commander. Before attacking a planet, the Iron Warriors always give the defenders one chance to surrender. If they accept, exactly 1/8 of the civilian population, chosen at random, is sacrificed to Kern, the rest remains as slaves to the Iron Warriors. However, the full armed forces of such a world are always sacrificed, as they chose not to fight, defeating their whole purpose. Far more frequently, the world refuses to kneel. Then, the Iron Warriors attack in their unstoppable fashion. They will sacrifice as many of their warriors as necessary to take a world, for Kern cares not from where the blood flows. The commanders are by no means exempt from this bloodletting. But their frontal assaults are always assisted by vast, bloody technology, the doing of the Storbezishk, and it is always strategic. The Iron Warriors, more than any other Space Marines, know no fear, and thus they can break through any foe. On defense, the 4th Legion will hold on to their fortresses with all the power they can, and they are, in fact, masters of the siege from both sides. There, they will ensure the enemy will have to expend vast quantities of lives to reach the interior of the fortifications, where they will be met not only by the Iron Warriors, but also by the daemons that their unwitting sacrifice will have summoned. Frequently, this will be enough to turn the tide of battle. If not, the Iron Warriors will stage a epic last stand, spilling as much blood as they can before the end, in the name of their god and in the name of Iron. Home World. The 4th Legion's original home world was Olympia, a mountainous and rocky planet in Segmentum Ultima. Before Perturabo's arrival it was divided into a number of city-states. The Lord of Iron united it under himself, and it remained unified until its destruction. Post-Perturabo Olympia was a world of such wondrous efficiency that even Gilliman could not allow it to be destroyed after the discovery. It saw no drop of blood spilled in battles of more than gang scales until Fok came, in the 33rd millennium, and sacrificed the last remnant of the Iron Warriors passed to the Blood God. Since the defeat on Terra, the Iron Warriors have found a new home world. Midgard is, in many ways, similar to Olympia, a planet of towering mountains, more so than even Olympia, for its peaks defy physics. But Midgard's stone summits are joined by hundreds more of iron. The towers of the Iron Warriors, like needles, riddle the landscape. One cannot go anywhere on Midgard without being seen by them. In the valleys, lakes of blood form, always flowing to lower elevations in a circular river. Near them, the human inhabitants of Midgard dwell, slaves of the Iron Warriors, assisting in the construction of the various planetary structures. The Legion's way is to feel no emotional attachment to them, but not to kill them without reason, for they are generally more useful alive than dead. Beliefs. The Iron Warriors' beliefs are best summed up by their unbreakable litany: from iron cometh strength. From strength cometh will. From will cometh faith. From faith cometh honor. From honor cometh iron. This is the unbreakable litany, and may it forever be so. They see faith in their patron deity, honor, will, and strength as intimately connected. They believe, fundamentally, that the destiny of mankind is war, and that it is a worthy, though harsh, destiny, and they strive to be the best at the unavoidable. They also, however, believe in iron self-control, avoiding transformation into the frothing madmen that many humans that serve Kern become. The Blood God seems not to mind that, as the Iron Warriors are also much more successful in gaining him skulls than those cultists. That is why I bested you, Bloodthirster, and all of your demonic army. That is why I could enslave you like I did all the rest. Because I have not lost myself to the call of war, despite embracing it. Even Foryx and Fok and the others have not truly done so, have they? We are the knights of this age. And as such, our oaths are sacrosanct, unbreakable. Our oaths to Kern, yes, but also our oaths to ourselves. Wars myth v Hostok Piston and Gene Seed. The Iron Warrior's gene seed is frequently mutated, in various ways, to give greater strength in battle. Much of the time, this also increases their quantity of blood. The Hemastamen is an especially common target for beneficial mutation. But on the whole, it is purer than that of most Chaos Legions due to the efforts of the Sineshith. Battle Cry. The Iron Warriors' battle cry is reversed from their ancient, pre-discovery one, to better represent the will of their patron, Iron Without. Iron Within. The Iron Within, of course, refers to blood. 999.m41. The depths of the Imperial Palace pulsed with light. The vault's roof was covered in cyan bioluminescent panels, specifically engineered to cancel out the psychic taint of the artifact contained within. The artifact that, as Robert Gilliman had suspected, was gone. He did not know who had taken it. Perhaps the Harlequins. It was not any of the Chaos Legions, certainly not the Iron Warriors, that, he knew for sure, because if any of them had taken it they would not have kept it a secret. Alpharius's agents would track the leads better than Gilliman could, though the War Master suspected that even his brother would not discover a clean trail. Yet if the relic was gone, its bearing was not. Gilliman picked up the crown unforgiving, gold, and lead intertwined in a circlet of stunning beauty. It was nevertheless clearly not a thing of idle beauty, and even now the ultimate warrior could see how it had interlocked with Perturabo's helm to provide an additional defensive screen as well as being a decoration to signal the Primarch's presence. It was a stunning meld of form and function, despite its age, though, of course, it was hardly the only achievement, technological or otherwise, of the Great Crusade that remained unsurpassed. Yet the effect was defeated by rage, the rage etched into the crown's brutal lines, carved by a Primarch mourning his sons, and the rage that seeped from its center like an unending slaughter, or perhaps a psychic screech. It had been created by a nearly peerless artisan. Perturabo had been far more skilled an engineer than Gilliman had ever appreciated at the time. If only the Lord of Iron had devoted more of his time to building, and not just to tearing down, but all of their fallen brothers had such stories attached to them, perhaps with one exception. No, Perturabo's tragedy was not unique, and he had chosen treachery of his own will, but still, if only. The crown was beautiful, yet the rage that spread from its center marred it. But that rage, now, was only a remnant. For the red pearl-like gem at the richly ringed center of the circlet was gone. For the crystal that held Perturabo's soul was missing. Gilliman tried to estimate the time from the front of absence that spread out from the casing. Years had passed, to be sure. If whoever had taken Perturabo intended to resurrect the Primarch, they'd have done so already, and Gilliman would have known that his brother existed once more. So perhaps they had merely wished to hold on to a precious relic, or to use it for some third purpose. But souls in spirit stones did not hold the entirety of an Eldar's identity. But Russ had only days ago mentioned the WYRD of that ancient duel squirming. But, as Gilliman traced the chronology of Rage of the Crown, he knew it had already decreased by orders of magnitude from what it had been during the escape. Check the description for the links to the author.